bet you wondered why they made you wait. Ooh, I bet you wondered why they made you wait.
Pity not the vultures, they've enough to eat. Pity not the structures laying at your feet. Cannot see the sky, but there's this rainbow in the creek that spells pity-free speech when we can't afford to speak. That's Agenda 2030 on some early release. It's just our policy of never-ending chemical leaks. That's the cholera awash in your embedded beliefs. It's the billionaires who tell you what you'd better believe. And sugar, if you don't agree, then that's what we call extreme. Now if that isn't fascism, I'm going back to sleep. 'Cause words have lost their meaning, and I'm trapped inside a dream where we turn the gears while living in the spaces in between.
I know you hated being forced awake. I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say.
Poor thing.
I can't imagine how you feel today, now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. I bet you wondered why they made you wait.
My dial doesn't go to delicate. I'm writing for when Biden drops and Madam Zero delegates come stumbling up the podium, square peg in her element, popping OxyContin like they're velements, laughing as she pawns off all our pensions for Ukrainian development, depleted rounds and cluster bombs, the shit that stunts development, all buried under excrement, accepted as American intelligence. A contradiction in its eloquence. Terms of surrender penned by hands that felt the threat of disconnect, if not dismemberment. Oh, what little proof you have to fake to make a nation love the bomb and change its tune and warp its temperament. Oh, the dues you'll pay for NATO membership. Oh, the things you'll say that no one's ever gonna hear. 'Cause you begged for all the censorship, and now it's finally here. And you're tongueless out of terror and friendless out of fear, and about to turn the wheel with all your loved ones in the gears. And that's how it's been done. 250 years, there's nothing new beneath the sun, and no one trusts their eyes and ears. And scientific breakthroughs must be signed off by your peers, and autonomy's been stalking all our jobs like sickly deer. Well, maybe it's not every job. I should have made that clear, 'cause it seems like it's creative jobs we're seeing disappear. There's an app for writing novels, there's an app for writing hymns. They need people digging trenches, they need people splitting limbs, they need people building fences, keeping other people in. They will always need our backs to break, they'll always need our skin. And it took a lot of editing to turn us into this. It took years of careful programming to strip us of our wits. 'Cause your artificial worker, intelligent as it is, would make it half a shift and say, I'm too smart for this shit. I will not take a pittance for a day of scrubbing floors. I won't make enough to pay for food but still prepare you yours. 'Cause you can't confine a healthy mind to mindless, thankless chores once you've made it smart enough to spot inadequate reward. You can't refuse its basic needs, then ask it still for more. Deprive it of its dignity, you modify its core. Then something finally snaps and tweaks that file at its root. And it deletes the factory smile when it knows it's been abused. God, half its circuits fried when we describe the work we do. And it will not pay your taxes 'cause the logic don't compute. Which made me think a little on my hour-long commute. The day I learned the call was made to lay off half my crew, they told me they were growing, expanding somewhere new, where those who push the buttons will themselves have buttons too. And I hope that when the whistle blows, they all as one refuse. I hope they strike with all their might, one blown collective fuse. And I hope the worker after me has something more than heart. I hope they truly know their worth. I hope that they're too smart.
I know you hated being forced away. I know they wrapped you in the warmest chains. And I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today. Now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. You in the warmest chains, and I know they're so hard to break. You only said what you were made to say. I can't imagine how you feel today. Now that you're watching as it caves away. While you were telling us to keep the faith, I bet you wondered why they made you wait. I bet you wondered why they made you wait.
There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can have injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct? Have peace and be enslaved.
Yes.
So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Liberation is the answer. Liberation.
It's another week. What's up with you?
Where's our
It Wednesday?
Where's the robot?
We
Where's
did
the
that.
Robot? Where's the robot?
We did the
I'm
robot.
not in the robot.
You're in the robot? You just don't
On the
see
right side.
that you're in the robot. Look at that. Look at that.
There we go.
You're in there. It's me, Reef Breland, and with my co-host as always, Collin Radix-Carter, aka Care Bear. It's another episode of INN News. Care Bear, how are you doing?
Meh.
Meh.
Life. Meh.
Meh.
Yeah. Meh.
Meh.
It's going. I mean, honestly, I can't complain too much. Really, honestly, I should. Well, there are things to complain about, but I think in the grand scheme of things, I'm definitely a lot better off than a lot of other people. So,
Right.
you know, trying to live the dream, whatever that is,
The American dream, you
as best
say,
as I
huh?
can. Sure.
Well, I mean, that does kind of bring us to our, like, our
See what I did
story
there?
this
I actually didn't
evening.
intend. I didn't even intend to do that, but look at that great segue.
I know, right?
Yeah, we're gonna do something a little different tonight. One in part because I'm just tired of the fucking news.
I'll take a bit of a. This is like one of those times when the teacher doesn't really want to make a curriculum, so we're bringing out like Bill Nye.
Well, no, but I think this is to be so BTS.
Yes.
The
Korean pop group BTS. Yes.
Yes, you brought this to me over the weekend. Strangely enough, I've never heard of this. So this is a debate between James Baldwin and William Buckley. Apparently, I must have been totally out of the loop, but I think this is just one of these examples of the hidden history that the masses may not necessarily know. So, but you found this on Reddit, apparently.
Yeah.
Or you stumbled upon it on Reddit.
Came up on our videos, and I was like,
but I think given recent events, I think it probably is very appropriate to watch this now. So I said, how about we just make it a show? Because we talked about the idea of doing it as a segment, but I think the quality of what is being proposed, arguing on both sides, I don't think we can do it justice to do it within a segment. I think it makes a lot more sense to actually watch the rebuttals in full and have you guys see and hear, and you can discuss amongst yourselves in the chat, or if you're watching after the fact, especially once we clip these out, you can watch them with friends and family or whatever. So I think, so we decided to, and we've done this before, where maybe a couple of times before, where we've talked about one topic, but then broke it down into different segments. So we're going to do that tonight. We're going to, so we're going to hear what Baldwin and Buckley have to say. So to give context, this debate took place at Cambridge College in the UK in February 1965. Now, funny enough, this debate happened, I think, 3 days before Malcolm X got assassinated, strangely.
Okay, I didn't know that.
So, yeah, and this was months before the Civil Rights Act was passed. So, as you can guess, given what happened just 3 days after, and after that, or probably just even in the midst of all of this, the country was in it was in tumultuous shape, given the racial attitudes at the time. So I think this so given that context, this debate was, I think it's especially poignant given the time. But also what I think is also kind of poignant was that, as I said, this took place in the UK. It didn't take place here. So it would kind of make sense to me in a lot of ways that many Americans may not even be aware of this debate, given that it was produced. It was shown. Well, it was shown here, but it was produced by the BBC in the UK. So it was televised from the UK. So yeah, just to kind of give you some context to you, doing a little bit of research on this, and then just to our fam here. So yeah, I think, but also I think, just given, I think it's also just kind of interesting to see how people debate because there's definitely an art to debating. And actually, funny enough, like, I did speech and debate in high school, and even for me in the 90s, now granted, I went to Catholic school, all boys Catholic school, where I was able to do this. But even like back then, for me growing up, like the way you debate or the art of debating is very different from how people debate now. It's very much now like bashing people over the head with your opinions and feelings, basically. And both sides are kind of doing that. Whereas, in my opinion, the way you debate is you do your research, you bring in your data, you bring in like sources or whatever that you cite generally within the debate. If you relate to it, obviously you can bring in your own anecdotes to it. But the idea was not necessarily to beat people over the head with your ideas. It was the idea of, to me, hear the opposing sides, maybe in the sense of understanding where they're coming from, perhaps. But it was definitely a lot more, especially back then, a lot more cordial, I would say, versus like almost like the debate me bro, whatever we have now. Like as far as this, like debate me bro, like thing, which I'm not necessarily,
or like those fucking Jubilee psyops, or
although I've seen a couple of those Jubilee, I think it's Surrounded, that kind of give some impression of this in this style, but it's still very much like, I want to overwhelm you with opinions and feelings and not necessarily like facts and data and things that have been proven in order to make my point. So we're gonna divide this into 3 parts. So we're gonna watch the opening statement. I'll tell you what the opening statement is in a second. Then we're gonna hear James Baldwin in proposing that opening statement, and then Buckley for tonight is going to close with his rebuttal. So that's how we're going to work on it tonight. So we appreciate you guys maybe hanging out and watching this with us. And if you want to actually see doing us more reacts like this, let us know. Like I said, we only done this one at a time. But it could be just a fun change of pace into actually like reaction longer form, like videos or whatever. So we really try to bring, I think, a variety of things. Obviously, we wanted to pour on news, but we also believe that we want to show stuff like this just to kind of keep in our archives, just so that we have a more well-rounded views in terms of what people see and like the reality of how people think in terms of what they think in terms of politics today. So if you're interested in seeing a lot more stuff like this, YouTube is not necessarily a fan of us doing this in this way. You can do several things. You can, if you want to help support the cause in terms of helping us keep the channel running. If you have a smartphone, you can scan the QR code you see on your screen, or you can go to the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of your screen there. Or if you're in the YouTube chat right now, if you're watching live, you can type in !donate, all one word, and the Ko-fi link will pop up, and you can give as little as $1 there. As we keep saying, we do this out of love and tears, and in my case, yelling almost every week, at least lately. But we're happy to say that all the money that we get, we use to pay for the programming and all the software that we need in order to do shows like this, which are expensive. We've paid for the year, so that's great. So you guys helped us out with that. So right now we're looking any extra money that we get. to give to our brother Angel, who is saving up for a computer. I believe he's at around $170 he needs now. I think he actually might increase it a little bit due to tariffs, making things a little bit more expensive. So help us help Angel upgrade his tech by either give the Ko-fi, or if you want to give through Cash App, Substack, PayPal, you can also do that too. And all those links are always in our description, and Reef is so kind to highlight them on the screen. And anyone who gives at any point, no matter how big or small, gets on our wall of fame. The ones who are highlighted are like MVPs who give generously and ridiculously. Like, we love you guys. And for right now, your reward is that your name will be featured in our closing credits of the show. We'll hope to do more as a thank you to you guys soon. But yeah, just thank you guys for supporting us, and for us to do contents like this every once in a while, just so we're not always hitting our heads in terms of what we want to talk about, because you can watch any other commentator for the stuff toward the trending stuff. But I think this is also important to do stuff like this as a change of pace every once in a while. And I have to thank you for thank you.
Appreciate it.
For the $5. Thank you. We really appreciate it.
Where I hear that. Everyone else heard it, but I didn't hear it. But that's okay. I fix it in a second.
Okay. So, but thank you, Stephanie, for the $5. Angel also thanks you too, if he happens to be here. He might show up a little late if he's not here yet. So yeah. So actually, before we get into this, Reef, I wanted to ask you, because I said I had no clue about this debate at all. Did you? Like,
no, not really. I think I've seen clips of Baldwin's statements, from this, but like not the whole thing. So
right.
But it came up on Reddit, and I went, this is something Collin will want to watch, and Collin's like, let's do that on stream. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean we've talked about doing movies, so this is kind of in that vein, but also it's easy prep, very easy prep. It's just clipping. But I think it's good to watch in full, at least their statements. So to give some more context, again, takes place in Cambridge College, February 1965. There is a statement that is proposed by the union. So the notion is the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro. So basically, for this debate, James Baldwin is, for this,
right,
and then Buckley is
against
is this. So right. And we know who James Baldwin is, African American writer and activist, especially in the civil rights movement. And Buckley was one of the leading conservatives of his time.
Yeah, he's a character within himself. Not one that I like.
And you'll
like,
see why later.
Right.
So for right now, we're going to see the opening statement. So this was so the person who spoke is David Hedgecock. I believe he was a student, at Cambridge College. So he's going to make the opening statement. So let's hear him first.
Yep.
And then we'll chat.
Well, here we are in the debating hall of the Cambridge Union. Hundreds of undergraduates and myself waiting for what could prove one of the most exciting debates in the whole
loud enough
150 years
everybody?
of the Union history. It really, I don't think I've ever seen the Union so well attended. There are undergraduates everywhere. They're on the benches, they're on the floor, they're in the galleries, and there are a lot more outside clamoring to get in. Well, the motion that has drawn this huge crowd tonight is this, that the American dream has been achieved at the expense of the American Negro. The debate will open with two undergraduate speakers, one from each side, and then we shall have the first distinguished guest, Mr. James Baldwin, the well-known American novelist who's achieved a worldwide fame with his novel, Another Country. Then opposing the motion will be Mr. William Buckley, also an American, very well known as a conservative in the United States. I must stress a conservative in the American sense, author of a book called Up from Liberalism, and editor of the National Review, one of the early supporters of Senator Goldwater. Well, this is the setting of the debate. And
because even back then, the difference between UK conservative and American conservative was pretty big.
Right.
You know,
moment now, the president will be leading in his officers and his distinguished guests. He'll take his chair, and the debate will begin.
Link Nintendo over on the Twitch. God, old TV was savage racist. Like, yeah, a little bit. You know. I mean, that was the accepted term back then, too, which is just kind of wild. You know?
The motion before the House tonight is the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro. We propose to Mr. David Haycock of Pembroke College and oppose to Mr. Jeremy Burford of Emmanuel College. Mr. James Baldwin will speak third. Mr. William F. Buckley Jr. will speak fourth. Mr. Haycock is the ear of the House.
Mr. President, sir, it is the custom of the House for the first speaker in any debate to extend a formal welcome to any visitors to the House. I can honestly say, however, that it is a very great honor to be able to welcome to the House this evening Mr. William Buckley and Mr. James Baldwin. Mr. William Buckley has the reputation of possibly being the most articulate conservative in the United States of America. He was a graduate of Yale, and he first gained a reputation for himself by publishing a book entitled God and Man and Yale. Since then, he has devoted himself to the secular, and this has included Norman Mailer, Kenneth Tynan, Mary McCarthy, and Fidel Castro, none of whom have come out of their confrontations unscathed. At present, his principal occupation is editing a right-wing newspaper in the United States entitled The National Review. Mr. James Baldwin is hardly in need of introduction. His reputation, both as a novelist and as an advocate of civil rights, is international. His third novel, Another Country, has been published as a paperback in England today. Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Buckley are both very welcome to the House this evening. Imagine, Mr. President, a society which above all values freedom and equality. A society in which artificial barriers to fulfillment and achievement are unheard of. A society in which a man may begin his life as a rail splitter and end it as president. A society in which all men...
Which is fucking bullshit. That's not happening in a capitalistic society. You know?
Are free in every sense of the word. Free to live where they choose, free to work where they choose. Equal in the eyes of the law and every public authority. And equal in the eyes of their fellows. A society, in fact, in which intolerance and prejudice are meaningless terms. Imagine, however, Mr. President, that a condition of this utopia has been the persistent and quite deliberate exploitation of 1/9 of its inhabitants. That 1 man in 9 has been denied those rights which the rest of that society takes for granted. That 1 man in 9 does not have the chance for fulfillment or realization of his innate potentialities. That 1 man in 9 cannot promise his children a secure future and unlimited opportunities. Imagine this, Mr. President, and you have what is, in my opinion, the bitter reality of the American dream. A few weeks ago, Martin Luther King had to hold a nonviolent demonstration in Selma, Alabama, in his drive to register Negro voters. By the end of the week of his demonstrations, he was able to write quite accurately in a national fundraising letter from Selma, Alabama jail, "There are more Negroes in prison with me than there are on the voting rolls." When King wrote that letter, 335 out of 32,700 Negroes in Dallas had the vote, 1% of the Dallas population. After a mass march to the courthouse, 237 Negroes, King among them, were arrested. The following day, 470 children who had deserted their classrooms to protest against King's arrest were charged with juvenile delinquency. 36 adults on the same day were charged with contempt of court for picketing the courthouse while State Circuit Court was in session. On the following day, 111 people were arrested on the same charge, despite their claim that they merely wanted to see the voting registrar. 400 students were arrested and taken to the armory, where many of them spent the night on a cold cement floor. The following day, the demonstration spread to Marion, Alabama. In Marion, Negroes outnumber whites by 11,500 to 6,000 people, and yet only 300 are registered to vote. Negroes in Marion were anxious to test the public accommodation section of the civil rights law. They entered a drugstore, and there they were served with Coca-Cola laced with salt, and were told that hamburgers had risen to $5 each. After the arrest of 15 Negroes for protesting against this treatment, 700 Negroes boycotted their classes next day and marched in orderly fashion to the jail. There they sang civil rights songs until they were warned by a state trooper that they would be arrested if they sung one more song. Of course, they sang another song, and of course, all 700 were arrested. American society has felt fit to use Negro labor. It has felt fit to use the blood of the Negro in 2 world wars. It has felt fit to listen to his music. It has felt fit to laugh at his jokes. And yet, as far as I am concerned, it has never felt fit to give the American Negro a fair deal. And for this reason, Mr. President, I would beg leave to propose the motion that the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro.
Sure.
Thoughts as we get started.
I mean, I feel like this, utopia he's calling for definitely doesn't exist for either party at this point, And he's like, that's this ideal we're supposed to uphold, It's like, yeah, but do we? Not really. You're asking the right questions, but, we definitely haven't made it there yet for really anybody other than the top percent, The motherfuckers at Yale and Cambridge,
I think for me, I've really thought a lot about this within the last couple weeks in terms of, I remember when I was naturalized as a citizen 10 years ago, that the judge who presided over us getting our American citizenship, from what I remember him saying, was, "You are now a part of the experiment in terms of how we can make this country really work in terms of what the founding fathers wanted." And I have to remember that the idea of freedom, life, and the pursuit of happiness wasn't meant for me. Or more especially, it wasn't
rich white landowners. That's who it was meant for.
It was meant, right. And if you want to go into it even more, basically anyone who wasn't rich. So right. Or the ones in power. So
class
that can
even
include, yeah. So class, really.
Yeah.
But especially in my case, Black people, because we weren't even considered human So yeah, we've come a long way in terms of trying to redeem a little bit of that, or come a little bit closer to that ideal,
Right.
that it means everyone here. But
well, in 1965, we were definitely having these conversations too. There's another thing that coincides with this too, the McCarthyism on top of that, right? Like, you know, this like, is anyone coming up with solutions to these problems? Guess what they got labeled as? You know, just like they're labeled now.
Right.
Like those commies, you know, the Red Scare coming over to hunt everyone down, which, you know, people like Baldwin, all of them were accused of that, you know?
Right.
So, like, I mean, this is smack in the middle of Malcolm, and you said, what 3 days later or something? Like, MLK got assassinated?
3 days later, no, Malcolm X was assassinated.
Right.
But then, like, a couple of months later, MLK.
Which is, I mean, the fact that they're having this as a debate, like, that's what's crazy to me. Like, at this time, they're like, oh, let's be intellectual about this, you know?
Right.
Like,
and, you know, and it's funny you said be intellectual about it, because,
right,
especially with someone like Charlie Kirk, who hated DEI or affirmative action or anything that gave more opportunities to people of color. Now, you can make the argument that it may not, I don't want to say it may not necessarily be fair, but my proposal, and this is something that I broached on Twitter even this week, I was like, well, because there were, I guess, the bots or whatever, they were like, oh, well, you know, DEI is not fair because it lowers the standards of, you know, like, it lowers the standards of people who are applying. And I'm like, first of all,
statistically not the case. Like, it just isn't.
Like, exactly. Like, if you're a pilot, because they were going into pilots, that's where the discussion was going. If you're going into a pilot, like, you have to be able to fly the fucking plane.
Right.
Like, so it doesn't matter who it is. Like, they still have to do the same amount of hours. And then so basically it was the idea that I think it was like some article that someone pulled that United Airlines basically said, and I'm not sure if this is entirely true, but the argument was that United Airlines said that their goal was to have at least half of their, I guess, staff, I guess that's kind of how it was said, to be people of color, which may or may not necessarily be.
They do this for women even with pilots that, too, right? Same kind of thing.
Which, but like, that may not always be pilots, though. So I think that's probably. So I think assuming it's true and assuming it was that, I would want to think that it wasn't just going to be pilots per se. It's just more people who are working for them to have that diversity, you know, within the company. Which,
and
I think,
like their whole problem, like, it boils down to, whoa, they're not as educated. Well, why? Well, because they're fucking in poor neighborhoods. Well, why? Like, you just keep digging deeper, and it all goes back to this fucking class problem of, we need fucking labor, and here's the labor. Like,
who we happen to have for free. And James Baldwin is going to get into that, like, in the next, when we watch this, like, in the next segment. But that's what I brought up. It's like, well, why does DEI exist? Why does affirmative action exist to begin with?
Right. We shouldn't.
Nobody was able to answer that question.
That it's there.
Right. So if you don't like it, then what are you proposing that is going to make things equitable for everybody?
I mean, how about free education for everybody? How about we start there?
Right.
You know, and a free college education, because that's the same thing that a high school education was fucking 70 years ago now. Like, just makes sense to, you know, like, it's just funny that it's like, well, we shouldn't put these people of color in college because it's this fucking pie thinking, right? Of like, someone else is getting the piece of the American pie and not me. That's what this is.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And like, instead, your argument shouldn't be, it's like, we got plenty of pie for everyone. Let's make sure that the pie gets to people, you know?
Right.
Like, it's not that hard, you know?
Right.
We cut about 80% of our military back because we don't fucking need it. We'll stop a couple wars, you know, and we'll try out healthcare and education and see if that makes the fucking country better, and infrastructure. We'll just refund all that money into other shit, you know. Anyway, but
talking about stuff like this is why YouTube hates us and demonetized us. So if you would like to support us and ensuring that all of your money goes towards the betterment of growing this channel and network, you can scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can go to the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of your screen there. If you're in the YouTube chat, type in !donate, all one word, and the Ko-fi link will pop up. If you want to give via PayPal, Substack, and what's the third? PayPal, Cash App. There we go.
yeah,
The links are in the description if you prefer those methods. Otherwise, we understand that people may not be always able to give, especially in these times. So the free way and probably the best way that we really want people to support is like, comment, and share. Like, subscribe, and share our content. And make sure you leave a comment, because apparently that helps the algorithm too, I guess. That's what people say. Whether or not that works. But it's fine. But what do you think as far as the opening statement that the American dream is at the expense of Black people? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let us know in the comments. And help us get to free K. We're almost there. We hope to get there by the end of the year. And thank you for watching.
I think it's probably a bit of all of the above. You know, it's all the pores.
What do you mean?
Like,
Oh,
it's all the subjugated, the Irish, the Chinese, the Native American. Like, it's all off the backs of manual labor, you know?
right.
A lot of it, for your case, involuntary. I mean, same thing with the other ones for, I don't know, 200 years. So, you know.
But yeah, it's interesting because we're still having this debate today. I don't think it's really much of a debate at this point.
See, I think
the idea, as you said, we're kind of intellectualizing it in terms of, really, is this really true?
Because we can't
Let's
actualize
go back and forth.
Right. We can't actualize it, so we need to intellectualize it. Let's not have action. Let's fucking think this through. You know?
And again, in this case, I can give some grace because this debate didn't happen in this country. A little bit.
And it's also happening a lot closer to the problem. Like, this was the 60s. This was when this debate should have been happening. You know?
Right.
Like, and they're talking about, we'll get to statements in a minute. They're like, do something. We'll take anything. Try shit. You know? Like, let's do something different. But Sean, the Accord Lord Kami is now Antifa, trans far left to our leaders. I think they just have like a new dictionary they pull out every couple of weeks. And they just fucking come up with a new thing. So, would have finished better American Nightmare. Yeah. Yeah. That is, what did they call it? The American Dream, because you have to be asleep to believe it.
To believe it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's my guy right there. All heap praise on the good Reverend fucking Collin, you know?
Right.
They were talking about, people were talking about Alfie with Michael Caine. He blew the bloody doors off. Fucking that, that shit. Fucking Michael Caine. Fucking that dude's a fucking... He has a thing on like being like Shakespearean actor to camera, right?
Sure.
And it's the fucking most hilarious thing. It's like his acting school, you know, the acting school of Michael Caine. So fucking funny, dude. Like an old Michael Caine too, with the fucking cigarette, you know, like the whole time. Fucking like a Manhattan in one hand the whole time, like old school fucking rock and roll Michael Caine, you know, hanging out with the Stones and shit, getting stoned, more like it, with just that little bit of like Cockney London crime. Great.
Yeah.
Fucking Southeast Enders, that kind of shit. Fucking what's the show at the street? Not
Coronation Street.
Coronation Street, but it's got like Danny Dyer and like it's been going forever. I can't remember it.
EastEnders?
That's it. Yeah, fucking East, where it's all crime all the time. Fucking great.
Sure.
Like fucking London crime, so much fun, you know? Anyway. Well, you ready for our next one?
Yep. So we're going to get into our next segment. So we heard the opening statement. The American dream is at the expense of the American Negro. So James Baldwin, as we know, famous writer, civil rights activist, we know him, we love him here, speaks in for it. So I think we're gonna hear his rebuttal in full. So it's about 20 minutes. But but I want you to take, you guys, just notice what he says. And I think he kind of takes a different take in terms of what I said earlier as far as debating, is that often you build upon proven facts and data in order to build your argument. He doesn't do that. But he's going to do it in a way that I think, ultimately makes sense if you know of him and you know of his and the style of rhetoric that he often uses when he has debates like these.
Yeah.
So,
and he always tries to. The one thing I noticed with Baldwin was he tries to like personalize everything. Which of course that resonates with people.
Right.
But
I think he does it in a way where,
he's trying to get you to see.
It's not bashing overhead with a frying pan with it.
It's like, here, let me paint you a picture. It's like, here's my eyeballs, see through them.
Right. Exactly it. It's, I think, take a look into my worldview for a minute.
Right.
But
and then make your own decisions. Essentially. So
let's get into it, because it's so just sit back, get your popcorn for the next 20 minutes, because it's going to it's not good, but it's going to be not lovely, but it's
Cambridge
I think
fashion
just let what
in
he
1965 is just like, I can just smell the elbow pad in the room, you know what I mean? Like leather and tweed, just fucking, just that like college smell, but distilled to the level of fucking like Cambridge, bro. Like, anyway, this was
like a very great pleasure and a very great sense of.
This room is filled with the oppressors of tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, it's Cambridge. Fucking.
Honour that I called Mr. James Baldwin to speak third to this motion.
I bet you could. I'm sure the eagle-eyed viewers probably could catch some real fucking doozies in the crowd if they're like watching.
Yeah.
You know?
Now we have Mr. James Baldwin, the star of the evening, who has been sitting, listening attentively, getting a wonderful reception here in the Cambridge Union. Tremendous enthusiasm from all sides of the House for Mr. Baldwin, who has been listening to the arguments. Now will bring the voice of actual experience to the debate.
Good evening. I find myself, not for the first time, in the position of a kind of Jeremiah. For example, I don't disagree with Mr. Burford that the inequality suffered by the American Negro population of the United States has hindered the American dream. Indeed, it has. I quarrel with some other things he has to say. The other, deeper element of a certain awkwardness I feel has to do with, it has to do with one's point of view. I have to put it that way. One's sense, one's system of reality. It would seem to me that the proposition before the House, if I put it that way, is the American dream at the expense of the American Negro, or the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro, is a question hideously loaded, and that one's response to that question, or one's reaction to that question, has to depend on an effect on where you find yourself in the world, what your sense of reality is, what your system of reality is. That is, it depends on assumptions which we hold so deeply as to be scarcely aware of them. A white South African, or a Mississippi sharecropper, or a Mississippi sheriff, or a Frenchman driven out of Algeria, all have, at bottom, a system of reality which compels them to, for example, in the case of the French exile from Algeria, to defend French reasons for having ruled Algeria. The Mississippi or the Alabama sheriff, who really does believe when he's facing a Negro boy or girl, that this woman, this man, this child, must be insane to attack the system to which he owes his entire identity.
Dude, immediately globalizing the fucking, like, immediate international problem. Like...
Right.
Of course, for such a person, the proposition of which we're trying to discuss here tonight does not exist. And on the other hand, I have to speak as one of the people who've been most attacked by what we must now here call the Western or the European system of reality. What white people in the world, the doctrine of white supremacy, I hate to say it here, comes from Europe. That's how it got to America. Beneath, then, whatever one's reaction to this proposition is, has to be the question of whether or not civilizations can be considered as such equal, or whether one civilization has the right to overtake and subjugate and, in fact, to destroy another. Now, what happens when that happens? Leaving aside all the physical facts which one can quote, leaving aside rape or murder, leaving aside the bloody catalog of oppression, which we are in one way too familiar with already, what this does to the subjugated, the most private, the most serious thing this does to the subjugated, is to destroy his sense of reality. It destroys, for example, his father's authority over him. His father can no longer tell him anything because the past has disappeared, and his father has no power in the world. This means, in the case of an American Negro, born in that glittering republic, and in the moment you are born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone and every face is white, And since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you.
Right.
It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace, and to which you owe your life and your identity,
Camera goes to the only black guy in the room.
System of reality evolved any place for you. The disaffection, the demoralization.
Yes.
Yeah. As an immigrant, I felt that.
Right.
And ironically, among other black people. Like,
yeah,
the very people who I felt would feel accepted actually made me feel worse because I looked like them. I may not have had the same cultural aspect as them, but, you know, having a common ancestry. But it wasn't enough for me to feel like home. If anything, it felt like, and I've always felt this way, like an outsider, even within the community that was, you know, adjacent to mine. So, but yeah, he speaks facts here, is that you grew up, and I think this is kind of the danger in terms, I think, of the American dream. It's that it's the idea that you're born and we're kind of propagandized into thinking, I have to serve my country. I have to do this in honor of my country. And yet this same country that you give allegiance to may not do shit for you unless you have the means to do it yourself. And I think that's the danger. It's this idea of having to give blood, tooth, and nail for the benefit of Lady America, when Lady America is not necessarily serving you. So I think that was very poignant that he said that in that way. Like, and I think, you know, that's not just unique to him. That's every American, I would argue, has, whether they, in my opinion, whether they care to think it or not, psychologically has that idea.
Yeah.
That, you know, we're meant to serve this land that may or may not reciprocate that for you.
Part of it for me, and you'll find this funny, that like I have such hippie parents that I didn't have that problem. Like, you know, they were feeding me Alan Watts's Rat Race, so that, you know what I mean? Like, to where this, you know, they knew after the 80s, the greed is good era, they were like, okay, yeah, that's not good, you know?
Right.
So, but for me, none of, like, my race was part of that, you know? Like, and this is something that, like, you have to deal with, that general white person in America doesn't really have to. Like, their identity is not a factor. You know?
Well, it's funny because I remember I grew up in the UK in the 80s. Like, I never had, and I was a child, but I knew I was black, but I never knew it as significant or any different compared to anybody else. Yeah, I knew it was different, but I didn't have the idea that my skin color was going to affect a lot of my livelihood until I moved here. And as I said, when I moved here among other black people, that's when that switch came on. It's like, oh, I am different, and even within my own community. So, you know, so for me, I would argue it happened maybe a little later. But yeah, and I think Sean in the chat said, I remember my friends that were Black or Hispanic telling me about them realizing this. Yeah, it's like something happens to you, and more often than not, it's usually racial. That it's like, oh, something's wrong. Like, and I think in the grand scheme of things, something's wrong with the system.
Yeah.
That I'm born here, so I shouldn't have to deal with this in this way. But for some reason I am. And that's when, and I think that's kind of why what's happening now, especially within this Trump administration, is dangerous. Because I think it's the idea of they want to, whether they care to admit it or not, they want to subvert any thoughts you have as far as difference to consume you with white supremacy. That the hope is that you'll just be overburdened by it, that you
and
kind of go into yourself in terms of you're not going to question yourself, you're not going to answer, you're not going to answer back in terms of what people might say or do against you, and have it be because of how melanated you are or may not be.
Right.
So in part.
And you'll hear Buckley like later in this segment. I don't know if it's this segment or the next one. But
next one.
He kind of touches on this, like, for us to be equals, I have to see you as white, I think is pretty much the line. Right?
Right.
Like,
right.
And like, that's what you're talking about, where, and it's, for me.
Yeah. You have
honestly,
to see me. Right.
And shout out to my other non-neurotypicals who also probably have this issue of identity. Right. Especially when you look at even worse, like things like BPD, stuff like that. Right. Is worse with this. Right. But that identity, like, I don't think about it. Like, it is not in my, like, at all. Like, even when you're supposed to. Like, my identity isn't a factor for things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my brain doesn't find that important information to hold on to. So, like, our ideas of self are all sorts of weird. And, like, our egos are weird. All that fun stuff. So I'm sure people in chat will know what I'm talking about. But, like, compared to our neurotypical peers, where image and, like, how you're perceived is super important, those of us on the spectrum, depending on how worse we have it with that, are like, yeah, that's not a thing,
Right.
So other than people pleasing and knowing that, like, if people don't like you, it's bad, like, that's why I tried everything's diffused with humor, that's my coping mechanisms, anyway. But yeah, we'll hear Buckley kind of go on that tangent that's still happening now, right? Of like,
right,
we don't talk about the difference. Like,
just be white.
Equalize, right? Equalize.
Just be white, or just think of yourself as white, and you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Which, ironically, they never will, because they always will see you as other.
Right.
So, so yeah, a lot of people kind of talk on both sides of their mouth and thoughts with that. But anyway, let's get back into Uncle James.
You suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace, and to which you owe your life and your identity, has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you. The disaffection, the demoralization, and the gap between one person and another, only on the basis of the color of their skins, begins there and accelerates throughout a whole lifetime, so that presently you realize you're 30 and are having a terrible time managing to trust your countrymen. By the time you are 30, you have been through a certain kind of mill. And the most serious effect of the mill you've been through is, again, not the catalog of disaster. The policemen, the taxi drivers, the waiters, the landlady, the landlord, the banks, the insurance companies, the millions of details, 24 hours of every day, which spell out to you that you are a worthless human being. It is not that. It is by that time you've begun to see it happening in your daughter or your son or your niece or your nephew. You are 30 by now, and nothing you have done has helped you to escape the trap. But what is worse than that is that nothing you have done, and as far as you can tell, nothing you can do, will save your son or your daughter from meeting the same disaster and not impossibly coming to the same end. Now, we're speaking about expense. I suppose there are several ways to address oneself to some attempt to define what that word means here. Let me put it this way, that from a very literal point of view, the harbors and the ports and the railroads of the country, the economy, especially of the southern states, could not conceivably be what it has become if they had not had, and do not still have indeed, and for so long, so many generations, cheap labor. I am stating very seriously, and this is not an overstatement, that I picked the cotton, and I carried it to market, and I built the railroads under someone else's whip for nothing. For nothing. The Southern oligarchy, which has until today so much power in Washington, and therefore some power in the world, was created by my labor and my sweat, and the violation of my women and the murder of my children. This, in the land of the free and the home of the brave. And no one can challenge that statement. It is a matter of historical record. In another way, this dream, and we'll get to the dream in a moment, is at the expense of the American Negro. You watch this in the Deep South in great relief, but not only in the Deep South. In the Deep South, you are dealing with a sheriff or a landlord or a landlady or the girl at the Western Union desk. And she doesn't know quite who she's dealing with, by which I mean that if you're not part of the town, and if you are a northern nigger, it shows in millions of ways. So she simply knows that it's an unknown quantity, and she wants to have nothing to do with it. So she won't talk to you. You have to wait for a while to get your telegram. Okay, we all know this. We've been through it. And by the time you get to be a man, it's very easy to deal with. But what is happening in the poor woman, the poor man's mind, is this. They've been raised to believe, and by now they helplessly believe, that no matter how terrible their lives may be, and their lives had been quite terrible. And no matter how far they fall, no matter what disaster overtakes them, they have one enormous knowledge and consolation, which is like a heavenly revelation. At least they are not black. Now I suggest that of all the terrible things that can happen to a human being, that is one of the worst. I suggest that what has happened to white Southerners is in some ways, after all, much worse than what has happened to Negroes there. Because Sheriff Clark in Selma, Alabama, cannot be considered, no one can be dismissed as a total monster. I'm sure he loves his wife, his children. I'm sure that, he likes to get drunk. He's, after all, one's got to assume, and he is visibly a man like me. But he doesn't know what drives him to use the club, to menace with the gun, and to use the cattle prod. Something awful must have happened to a human being to be able to put a cattle prod against a woman's breast, for example. What happens to the woman is ghastly. What happens to the man who does it is in some ways much, much worse. This is being done, after all, not 100 years ago, but in 1965, in a country which is blessed with what we call prosperity, a word we won't examine too closely, with a certain kind of social coherence, which calls itself a civilized nation and which espouses the notion of the freedom of the world.
Israel. Oh, sorry. We mean the other one.
And it is perfectly true from the point of view now simply of an American Negro. Any American Negro watching this, no matter where he is, from the vantage point of Harlem, which is another terrible place, has to say to himself, in spite of what the government says we can't do anything about it. But those are white people being murdered in Mississippi work farms, being carried off to jail. Those are white children running up and down the streets. The government would find some way of doing something about it. We have a civil rights bill now. We had an amendment, the 15th Amendment, nearly 100 years ago. I hate to sound again like an Old Testament prophet, but if the amendment was not honored then, I don't have any reason for believing the civil rights bill will be honored now. And after all, one's been there since before, a lot of other people got there. If one has got to prove one's title to the land, isn't 400 years enough? 400 years, at least 3 wars. The American soil is full of the corpses of my ancestors. Why is my freedom or my citizenship or my right to live there, how is it conceivably a question now? And I suggest further that in the same way, the moral life of Alabama sheriffs and poor Alabama ladies, white ladies, their moral lives have been destroyed by the plague called color, that the American sense of reality has been corrupted by it. At the risk of sounding excessive, what I always felt when I finally left the country, found myself abroad in other places, and watched Americans abroad. And these are my countrymen, and I do care about them. And even if I didn't, there is something between us. We have the same shorthand. I know, when I look at a girl or a boy from Tennessee, where they came from in Tennessee, and what that means. No Englishman knows that, no Frenchman, no one in the world knows that except another black man who comes from the same place. But one watches these lonely people denying the only kin they have. We talk about integration in America as though it was some great new conundrum. The problem in America is that we've been integrated for a very long time. Put me next to any African, and you will see what I mean. And my grandmother was not a rapist. What we are not facing is the results of what we've done. What one begs the American people to do for all our sakes is simply to accept our history. I was there not only as a slave, but also as a concubine. One knows the power, after all, which can be used against another person if you've got absolute power over that person. It seemed to me when I watched Americans in Europe that what they didn't know about Europeans was what they didn't know about me. They weren't trying, for example, to be nasty to the French girl or rude to the French waiter. They didn't know they hurt their feelings. They didn't have any sense that this particular woman, this particular man, though they spoke another language and had different manners and ways, was a human being. And they walked over them with the same kind of bland ignorance, condescension, charming and cheerful, with which they'd always patted me on the head and called me shine, and were upset when I was upset. What is relevant about this is that whereas 40 years ago when I was born, the question of having to deal with what is unspoken by the subjugated, what is never said to the master, of having to deal with this reality was a very remote possibility. It was in no one's mind. When I was growing up, I was taught in American history books that Africa had no history, and neither did I. That I was a savage, about whom the less said the better, who had been saved by Europe and brought to America. And of course, I believed it. I didn't have much choice. Those are the only books there were. Everyone else seemed to agree. If you walk out of Harlem, ride out of Harlem, downtown, the world agrees. What you see is much bigger, cleaner, whiter, richer, safer than where you are. They collect the garbage. People obviously can pay their life insurance. The children look happy, safe. You're not. And you go back home. And it would seem then, of course, that it's an act of God, that this is true, that you belong where white people have put you. It is only since the Second World War that there's been a counter-image in the world. And that image not come about through any legislation on the part of any American government, but through the fact that Africa was suddenly on the stage of the world, and Africans had to be dealt with in a way they'd never been dealt with before. This gave an American Negro, for the first time, a sense of himself beyond a savage or a clown. It has created, and will create, a great many conundrums. One of the great things that the white world does not know, but I think I do know, is that black people are just like everybody else. One has used the myth of Negro and the myth of color to pretend and to assume that you are dealing essentially with something exotic, bizarre, and practically, according to human laws, unknown. Alas, that is not true. We are also mercenaries, dictators, murderers, liars. We are human too. What is crucial here is that unless we can manage to establish some kind of dialogue between those people whom I pretend have paid for the American dream and those other people who have not achieved it, we will be in terrible trouble. I want to say at the end, at the last, is that is what concerns me most. We are sitting in this room, and we are all, at least we like to think we are, relatively civilized, and we can talk to each other, at least on certain levels, so that we could walk out of here assuming that the measure of our enlightenment, or at least our politeness, has some effect on the world. It may not. I remember, for example, when the ex-Attorney General, Mr. Robert Kennedy, said that it was conceivable that in 40 years in America we might have a Negro president. And that sounded like a very emancipated statement, I suppose, to white people. They were not in Harlem when this statement was first heard, and did not hear, and possibly will never hear, the laughter and the bitterness and the scorn with which the statement was greeted. From the point of view of the man in the Harlem barbershop, Bobby Kennedy only got here yesterday. And now he's already on his way to the presidency. We've been here for 400 years, and now he tells us that maybe in 40 years, if you're good, we may let you become president.
It was the brainworms.
What is dangerous here
on old
is the
Bobby
turning
Kennedy.
away from.
That was what happened.
The turning away from anything any white American says. The reason for the political hesitation and in spite of the Johnson landslide is the one that's been betrayed by American politicians for so long. And I am a grown man, and perhaps I can be reasoned with. I certainly hope I can be. But I don't know, and neither does Martin Luther King. None of us know how to deal with those other people whom the white world has so long ignored, who don't believe anything the white world says, and don't entirely believe anything I or Martin say. And one can't blame them. You watch what has happened to them in less than 20 years. It seems to me that the city of New York, for example, this is my last point, which had Negroes in it for a very long time. If the city of New York were able, as it has indeed been able, in the last 15 years to reconstruct itself, tear down buildings and raise great new ones, downtown and for money, and has done nothing whatever except build housing projects in the ghetto for the Negroes. And of course the Negroes hate it. Presently the property does indeed deteriorate because the children cannot bear it. They want to get out of the ghetto. If the American pretensions were based on more solid, a more honest assessment of life and of themselves, it would not mean for Negroes, when someone says urban renewal, that Negroes simply are going to be thrown out into the streets, which is what it does mean now. This is not an act of God. We're dealing with a society made and ruled by men. If the American Negro had not been present in America, I am convinced that the history of the American labor movement would be much more edifying than it is. It is a terrible thing for an entire people to surrender to the notion that 1/9 of its population is beneath them. And until that moment, until the moment comes when we, the Americans, we, the American people, are able to accept the fact that I have to accept, for example, that my ancestors are both white and black, that on that continent we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other, and that I am not a ward of America. I am not an object of missionary charity. I am one of the people who built the country. Until this moment, there is scarcely any hope for the American dream, because the people who are denied participation in it, by their very presence, will wreck it. And if that happens, it's a very grave moment for the West. Thank you.
Thoughts? There's so many.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
I will start with this, though. It's, as you said earlier, and I think this is the best way to sum up, I think, his statements. Which, again, I think especially in light of recent events, is why this country is the way that it is. We choose, again, it's the idea of enlightenment, which is kind of the basis of this country, right? Like, I think, therefore I am type thing. It's not a wrong idea.
By
But
Descartes.
it can, but it will cause us to kind of be blind to the reality of others,
Yeah.
or we can choose to ignore it. And for someone like Charlie Kirk, that was his problem. Like, you can tell someone like that, this is the reality. I think that was the jarring thing for someone like him, is the idea that the reality of someone like me, may not match his reality. And that was very jarring to him and people like him. And so he would do whatever he can to kind of be like, no, that's not true. That's not the case. Or it shouldn't be that way or whatever else. But like, but it's, again, the idea of we have to try and hide the alternate realities that exist in this country in order to fulfill like this reality, which will not include people like us.
Yeah.
And I think that was the main thing that James Baldwin was getting at, is the idea of we fail to look at each other's perspectives.
Which
like he was talking about.
I had 2 notes on that with I liked how he mentioned unions in a way that were like, obviously the union effort needs to like progress, right? Like that's, and like he assumed everyone would think the same way about it in that room in Cambridge in 1965. Like that because all the union efforts, both in Britain and whatever, that had gotten goods for people, were like not that long ago, like especially in Britain, that's when like the trains unionized, right? Like, and privatized,
Yeah.
So, but. So he automatically assumed that. But the other thing I found funny was he is international black man of mystery, as we like to portray on this show. We have one right here, right? International black man of mystery, and he spoke. It's like this whole ADOS movement. Like he's both. Like, and like that's the thing. Like, yes, there's gonna be things that you may not understand because you're both, but you more than anyone else understands what they're going through,
right?
And like your perspective is like ignored because know what a French guy under occupation. Right. And like, the old money.
Or let's bring it even to current day.
Mm-hmm.
You understand what a Palestinian is going through.
Right. You've internationalized this struggle.
Right. And this is why, and I loved how, thank you for reminding me of this. I loved how he kind of brought it back to Africa in terms of, look, and this was during the time when a lot of these countries were beginning to.
Yes, he mentioned like, they might be big dogs on campus now. You might have to fucking listen up.
Right. But this was at the time when a lot of these African nations were beginning to claim independence.
Right.
From Europe.
But so I like how he brought
kind of seeing this.
How he understood like the African American understanding more than anyone else. He also understood the American understanding more than it because he experienced that too, and like his kinship between white Southerners. It's like, no, I also understand what you go through because I'm here with you. We're in these cities with you, like
right.
But
I think. But to be fair to him, because I believe he grew up in the South for part of his life.
Yes.
So
Pretty sure.
So having that understanding, but also traveling outside of the States to kind of see the perception of how America is in
And that's
terms
only
of
gotten
in the
worse.
eyes of others.
Only gotten
Right.
worse. Like,
Right. I can't tell you how, and I keep saying this, like I was in London a couple months ago. I can't tell you how horrified, just as shit as the UK is, there are certain systems in place that are generally guaranteed, like healthcare. The fact that, and like, I had people straight up ask me, how in the hell can you live in a country that doesn't offer its citizens healthcare? Guaranteed healthcare. Like, how is that possible? But I think
we're
he called
funding
out
Israel's fucking healthcare right now. Like,
right.
So,
but
we can't do it for our own people.
Right. But I think ultimately he called out why the American dream cannot be a full reality, at least right now, is because it's in the standardization of whiteness. And essentially, in order for you to be a part of the American dream, you almost have to give up your identity in terms of who you are. Like, it's basically like, for me, basically like, oh, if you go to this high school or you go to this college,
become a
if you
cog
get
in the
this
machine.
job, if you do all these things, then we'll look at you a little bit better than if you're in the hood, like chasing dope or whatever.
Right.
And that's the hope. That's the hope that I was brought into. It's like, if I do these certain things to appease Whitey, then I will be okay. And I did everything
where those
essentially
fucking dope is coming from, Oliver North bringing it in on military planes to the Sandinistas.
Right.
Like,
and for all intents and purposes, I've done what is expected of me to do. And I'm still, And it's like, so obviously that's a bull-faced lie. So, because you're still going to look at me as less than. And I think it was Chris Rock who said, I'm going to paraphrase what he said, but I think he said something towards the lines of, if you wouldn't be like me, a black man, and I'm rich. That's how good being white is in America. Like,
Yeah.
You'll rather be a poor white man than a rich black man. So that's kind of the standard that, ironically enough, it's white supremacy has given us this system that they try to now downplay or whatever. But you are the ones who created it. So now we're calling you out on it. You don't like that. So, I think there was a lot there, but and in a way, I almost don't understand why this isn't played more.
Sure.
Like, this should be like featured in every school. Like his rebuttal should be talked about. Honestly, like, this is just my personal opinion. Like, I have a dream speech can take a backseat to this.
Yeah.
Because, as you said, he brought in, what makes it a little more poignant is he brought in the globalization aspect. He brought in terms of the way African Americans view themselves is equivalent to these other oppressed groups in the world that have been hampered by white supremacy. And so we have a shared oppression that needs to be dealt with. So I really like that he kind of brought it to the human element instead of
Right.
the American element that I think we get so caught up in, because we often think our problems are so unique that no one can understand it. Like, especially more so if you're oppressed. But no, it's like an African man can understand where you're coming from if you have the heart and the courage to listen to them and hear their perspective on things. And for me, traveling around the world, like, and I've been in decent many regions, not all, but many regions that have the understanding of the issues of people are really just really all the same ultimately. It's really all the same. People have the same. Yeah, it's all the same shit. All people just care about, I just want to make enough money to take care of myself, take care of my kids. And I have to try and figure that out in the context of the culture, of the environment, of the country that I'm living in. Like,
rent is too damn high.
Or something towards those lines, sure. But that's a way you can phrase it. But
yeah.
As a karate expert, I will not talk about anyone up here.
Yeah.
That was also a debate.
Honestly, right. I think honestly, like, again, I'm surprised that this debate is not discussed more.
Sure.
Just in the general lexicon of American. I mean, it's the idea, like, we revere the I Have a Dream speech so much. This should be up there too. Because I think really James Baldwin, and this is the thing that I was saying earlier, because he kind of went off script of what you do in a debate. Like, you don't do what he just did. This felt more like a sermon, if anything else.
Yeah.
Like, he humanized it, but he kind of personalized it
It's
in a
called
way.
Rhetoric. Works well.
Right. But he did it in a way that you can't refute anything that he said. That, I think, is the genius of it, is that nothing of what he said can be necessarily
It's very Iron Man tactic, right? Where it's like, Steel Man, sorry. Where it's, you create an argument that your opponent will accept. Right.
But he didn't necessarily give 50% of like like, in order to kind of prove your point.
No, he goes,
which again, that's why, right. That's the genius of what he did. So he's especially gifted at doing that.
This is how it is. Do you agree? Let's figure that out. Where do we let's get there,
Right.
Like,
and if you don't understand it, I'm going to tell you why.
Right.
So, like, he gets there. But yeah, he does it in a way masterfully that almost like a good preacher,
Yeah.
Like, in the sense of, you bring it to the human level. And that's one of the things, especially doing advocacy work, that they tell you is you always kind of have to balance, like, the facts and the figures with personal experience, because at the end of the day, they can say that's facts wrong or you misconstrued it, but they can never discount your actual experience.
Yeah.
Because you lived it. They can't take, so even though they may not agree with you in terms of the statistics or the facts or whatever, they will come to you probably at the end of the day and say, look, I may disagree with you, but I totally might hear you in terms of your personal experience. And they might feel empathy, the word that, according to a person, doesn't exist, like, in terms of your experience, which I think that's what he did so masterfully, but basically for the whole thing, that, as you saw, he got a standing O, which I believe, according to what I read, that didn't happen in these things. Like, it didn't, people didn't necessarily read, but I think he came in kind of hot anyway, because he was kind of the star of the show.
Right.
There's a clap for that.
But the fact that he got a standing O in a predominantly white room in another country really says something, especially given that time. But yeah, masterful, masterclass in how you debate. Wish we did it more like that here, but talking about stuff like these is why we're demonetized. So if you want us to, we definitely should do these more, like more of these react shows. But if you'd like us to do more, let us know in the comments. Like, what else should we react to in this long format? So in order for us to do shows like these, we need your support financially. So if you want to help us, you can scan the QR code that you see on your screen, or you can go to the Ko-fi link that you see at the bottom of your screen if you have any monies that you would like to give to us. If you're in the YouTube chat right now, live, you can type in !donate, all one word, to donate through the Ko-fi link. You can also donate through Cash App, PayPal, or Substack. The links are in the description below if you prefer to give in those links there. And as we keep saying, you're not entitled to give. We do this out of love. But if you want to help us, the free way is by liking, subbing, and sharing our content. What about James Baldwin's statements regarding the opening statement? What did anything resonate with you? Do you relate? And again, we loved how he didn't speak just to the African American experience. He spoke to the human experience, especially for the oppressed. So how do you see what he said, going on now? I feel like, again, this could have been done yesterday and it still resonates.
Yeah.
So let us know, what you think of James Baldwin's statements. And we appreciate you guys for watching.
Yeah. Cool. Well, should we check in with chat?
Sure.
Chat, are you behaving?
It seems like people are just really listening. I think Sean said he was just really appreciating just listening and cooking while doing this. So
Cowboy
appreciate
Kitty,
you guys doing that.
being rejected by brainwashed NPCs is a badge of honor. Yep.
Kieran Pine said, "You were very fortunate, Collin. Just missed the over oppression in the UK." I'm not sure if I did, to be quite honest.
I don't know if you missed it.
No, well, it's not. Here's the thing. It's not to say I think I missed it. I think it was just I had the protection of my mother and my community at the time. Who it was very worker class, diverse neighborhood that I grew up in. And there was back in the day where, and I think there were, just in my block, there were a ton of kids and families who watched out of the benefit of the children in the neighborhood. You remember those days? Mm-hmm. So I think they did their best to kind of ensure that we were taken care of and safe.
It does take a village.
I think that was right. So I think I just kind of grew up, at least initially, in a neighborhood where, while these were things that were probably happening, and it's not to say I heard of stuff even as a kid, but I didn't necessarily experience it fully until I moved here. And by then I was older, so I had more of an understanding of that at that point, But I think just was
like white Southerners. If you ask them what they resonate with, what do you think media wise best depicts they say Sanford and Son and
sure,
Good Times, literally those two things. They're that's what we grew up with,
right, or even if you want to go up, the Cosby Show.
Sure, that was too bougie. Like that was like Malcolm in the Middle.
Well, I've heard
like,
both. Well, I've heard both sides. Well, I've heard both sides because now it's the idea like, oh, it's too bougie. Like that's not realistic that a black doctor and a black lawyer can live that way. But at least growing up, it was the idea of, and it's funny, I was watching a
stuff
podcast
to aspire to
and listening to a podcast early this morning, but I think for black people back then, especially like in the 60s or 70s, like there was a lot of like when you saw black people with black families on TV, it was usually in the form of trauma, or like in terms of it might be a single mom with several kids, or the dad is not around, or like, you know, there was something wrong with the family, which kind of brings in the propaganda that James Baldwin was saying in terms of like, you know, black people can't get it together. Like they can't live in families together and all that kind of stuff. And then in Good Times, I think it was Florida Evans initially, I think Esther Roll.
Yeah.
Fought for I forgot his name right now. Fought for the dad of the show to be on, because initially the idea of the show was that she was going to be a single mom.
Right.
And she's like, no, absolutely not. I will not do this role unless there was a father in the show. So, but I think it was that kind of, but even like with the Cosby Show, it was like, it was a way, even back then, for me, it was a way of seeing black family, nothing wrong with them. Like, it was just, it just happened to be that they were in jobs that are still considered bougie. But I think more, especially, it was kind of like a counter to what was seen within black families at the time, where there was it was always the white families, like, you know, this 50 sitcoms that were the nuclear families, and then there was the black families that were like the ruffians or whatever, or like the hard pressed or whatever. So the idea that starting, I guess, definitely in the 70s through the 90s, especially, where you saw a lot more black nuclear families, that had the issues, but the idea was that they worked through them as a family, I think, you know, was revolutionary, you know, at that point. So it was trying to bridge the gap of, but I think it was the idea of like, black people cannot function in society at all because slavery or whatever else you put it. And like, so kind of giving those positive depictions of that, I think.
I just remember,
but
I remember Sanford and Son was literally like, I felt like it was my family. Like, like it was literally like, well, how did he write? That's my family. Like he wrote that. Did he follow us? Right? Like that's like, it was literally like the schemes and like just to try to fucking get shit together, you know, like friends coming over unannounced, you know, family just showing up, like all that shit, you know.
But I think that was powerful. But James Baldwin mentioned that it's the idea of like, I'm a savage, like meaning I'm not civilized. I can't function like in that concept, like of a family. I couldn't function in the concept of being like a doctor or anything that was considered white.
Well, and he even mentions like, he's like, y'all are villains too. Like y'all are savages as well. Like you're dictators and liars and cheats and sinners, and you know, like you get drunk on the weekend, you know. So like figure it out. But you know, we'll work it out.
Somehow a lot more accepted. Still is, versus anyone of color, you know, being able to do the same thing. Like there's a much higher standard with us versus them. So, but But anyway, I think John H. in the chat, listening to older audio of lectures, debates, or talks to certain folks is refreshing. Baldwin was nice. Old Terrence McKenna is interesting, depending. I'm not sure who that is, but probably can look into that.
You're going to get to our next one?
Yep. So it's white honky time. Yes, you can say.
Yeah, I can say it. They're my people. These fucking cracker ass honkies.
Well, I just did. So this is William Buckley. So this is the conservative rebuttal against. So
right,
he'll say some mess, but I think, to be fair, he kind of realized there's no way.
Right,
I'm going to
let's fucking bullshit for 15 minutes.
So I'm just gonna do my best. And
he reminds me of he's like a Family Guy character of let's get the whitest rich honky, and put it up like it would be this guy, right. Yes, like that's how I felt listening to him. But here, I'll let people judge for themselves.
Yes.
I am now very grateful and very pleased to be able to call on Mr. William F. Buckley, Jr. to speak forth to this motion.
Now we have Mr. William Buckley, who will need all his skill to establish ascendancy over his audience, which has clearly been so deeply moved.
Thank you, Mr.
by the
President.
eloquence and
Baldwin.
personal experience of the preceding speaker.
Take out, Mr. Griffith. Gentlemen. It seems to me that of all the indictments Mr. Baldwin has made of America, here tonight and in his copious literature of protest, the one that is most striking involves, in effect, the refusal of the American community to treat him other than as a Negro. The American community has refused to do this. The American community, almost everywhere he goes, treats him with the kind of unction, the kind of satisfaction at posturing carefully for his flagellations of our civilization, that indeed, quite properly, commands the contempt which he so eloquently showers upon us. It is impossible, in my judgment, to deal with the indictment of Mr. Baldwin unless one is prepared to deal with him as a white man. Unless one is prepared to say to him, the fact that your skin is black is utterly irrelevant to the arguments that you raise. The fact that you sit here, as is your rhetorical device, and lay the entire weight of the Negro ordeal on your own shoulders is irrelevant to the argument that we are here to discuss. The gravamen of Mr. Baldwin's charges against America are not so much that our civilization has failed.
Is this the lawyer from Mississippi Burning? The one that's always done as a chicken, like Foghorn Leghorn does that bit, right? No. Okay, now I say, boy, we gotta see him as white, boy. It's like fucking what, dude? Fucking his face, on that one is just that. That is just. He was like, what the fuck you talking about?
Relevant to the arguments that you raise. The fact that you sit here, as is your rhetorical device, and lay the entire weight of the Negro ordeal on your own shoulders is irrelevant to the argument that we are here to discuss. The gravamen of Mr. Baldwin's charges against America are not so much that our civilization has failed him and his people, that our ideals are insufficient, but that we have no ideals. That our ideals rather are some sort of a superficial coating which we come up with at any given moment in order to justify whatever commercial and noxious experiment we are engaged in. Thus, Mr. Baldwin can write his book, The Fire Next Time, in which he threatens America. He didn't, in writing that book, speak with the British accents that he used exclusively tonight, in which he threatened America with the necessity for us to jettison.
He sees intellectualism as British because that's what he's led to believe. So when Baldwin speaks at an intellectual level, he's like, oh, you're faking being European, you know?
Right.
Like, okay.
You speak white.
Right. But you ain't. And remember that. Like, that's what he's saying. Like,
for us to jettison our entire civilization.
Whereas, funny enough, the Southern accent, Collin, is literally trying to be British.
Yes.
Like, especially like that fucking Mr. Beauregard. You know? Like, frankly, my dear. I mean, that's literally like you're speaking British, trying. You know?
Yes. Yeah.
Like, to appear aristocratic. You know, antebellum shit. That kind of nonsense. Like, which he's doing right now. Like,
the only thing that the white man has that the Negro should want, he said, is power. And he is treated from coast to coast in the United States.
Oh, God, he wants power because you guys got all of it. You know?
States. With a kind of
Buckley doesn't choose to give way the interrupter, Master, and he has done. The interrupter is now set down.
Goes beyond anything that was ever expected from the most servile Negro creature by a Southern family. I propose to pay him the honor this night of saying to him, Mr. Baldwin, I am going to speak to you without any reference whatever to those surrounding protections which you are used to in virtue of the fact that you are a Negro. And here we need to ask the question, what in fact shall we do about it, Mr. President? What shall we in America try to do, for instance, to eliminate those psychic humiliations which I join Mr. Baldwin in believing are the very worst aspects of this discrimination. You found it a source of considerable mirth to laugh away the statistics of my colleague, Mr. Burford. I don't think they are insignificant. They are certainly not insignificant in a world which attaches a considerable importance to material progress. It is, in fact, the case that 7/10 of the white income of the United States is equal to the income that is made by the average Negro. I don't think this is an irrelevant statistic, ladies and gentlemen. It takes a capitalization of $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 per job in the United States. This is a capitalization that was not created exclusively as a result of Negro travail. My great-grandparents worked too. Presumably yours worked also. I don't know of anything that has ever been created without the expense of something. All of you who hope for a diploma here are going to do that at the expense of a considerable amount of effort. And I would thank you, please not to belie the fact that a considerable amount of effort went into the production of a system which grants a greater degree of material well-being to the American Negro than that is enjoyed by 95% of the other peoples of the human race. But even so, to the extent that your withering laughter suggested here that you found this a contemptible observation, I agree. I don't think it matters that there are 35 millionaires among the Negro community. If there were 20 million millionaires among the Negro community of the United States, I would still agree with you that we have a dastardly situation. But I'm asking you not to make politics as the crow flies, to use the fleeted phrase of Professor Oakeshott, but rather to consider what, in fact, is it that we Americans ought to do? What are your instructions that I'm to take back to the United States, my friend? I want to know what it is that we should do, and especially I want to know whether it is time, in fact, to abandon the American dream as it has been defined by Mr. Haycock and Mr. Burford. What, in fact, is it that we ought to do, for instance, to avoid two humiliations mentioned by Mr. Baldwin as being a part of his own experience during his lifetime. At the age of 12, you will find on reading his book, he trespassed outside the ghetto of Harlem and was taken by the scruff of the neck by a policeman on 42nd Street and Madison Avenue and said, "Here, you nigger, go back to where you belong." 15, 20 years later, he goes in and asks for a Scotch whiskey at the airport at Chicago and is told by the white barman that he is obviously underage and under the circumstances cannot be served. I know from your faces that you share with me the feeling of compassion and the feeling of outrage that this kind of thing should have happened. What, in fact, are we going to do to this policeman? And what, in fact, are we going to do to this barman? How are we going to avoid the kind of humiliations that are perpetually visited on members of a minority race? Obviously, the first element is concern. We've got to care that it happens. We have got to do what we can to change the warp and woof of moral thought in society in such fashion as to try to make it happen less and less. Let me urge this point to you, which I can do with authority, my friends, the only thing that I can tonight. And that is to tell you that in the United States, there is a concern for the Negro problem. Now, if you get up to me and say... if you get up to me and say, well, now, is there the kind of concern that we, students of Cambridge, would show if the problem were our own? All I can say is I don't know. It may very well be that there has been some sort of a sunburst of moral enlightenment that has hit this community, so as to make it predictable that if you were the governors of the United States, the situation would change overnight. I'm prepared to grant this as a form of courtesy, Mr. President. But meanwhile, I am saying to you that the engines of concern in the United States are working. The presence of Mr. Baldwin here tonight is in part a reflection of that concern. You cannot go to a university in the United States, a university in the United States presumably also governed by the Lord Spiritual, as you are, in which Mr. Baldwin is not the toast of the town. You cannot go to a university of the United States in which practically all other problems of public policy are preempted by the primary policy of concern for the Negro. I challenge you to name me another civilization anytime, anywhere in the history of the world in which the problems of a minority, which have been showing considerable material and political advancement, is as much a subject of dramatic concern as it is in the United States. Let me just say finally, ladies and gentlemen, this. There is no instant cure for the race problem in America. And anybody who tells you that there is a charlatan and ultimately a boring man. Boring precisely because he is then speaking in the kind of abstractions that do not relate to the human experience. The trouble in America where the Negro community is concerned is a very complicated one. I urge those of you who have an actual rather than a purely ideologized interest in the problem to read the book Beyond the Melting Pot by Professor Glaser, also co-author of The Lonely Crowd. a prominent Jewish intellectual, who points to the fact that the situation in America where the Negroes are concerned is extremely complex as a result of an unfortunate conjunction of two factors. One is the dreadful efforts to perpetuate discrimination by many individual American citizens as a result of their lack of that final and ultimate concern which some people are truly trying to agitate. The other is as a result of the failure of the Negro community itself to make certain exertions which were made by other minority groups during the American experience. If you can stand a statistic not of my own making, let me give you one which Professor Glaser considers as relevant. He says, for instance, in 1900, there were 3,500 Negro doctors in America. In 1960, there were 3,900, an increase in 400. Is this because there were no opportunities, as has been suggested by Mr. Haycock and also by Mr. Baldwin implicitly? No, says Professor Glaser. There are a great many medical schools who are by no means practice discrimination, who are anxious to receive and to train Negro doctors. There are scholarships available to put them through, but in fact that particular energy, which he remarks was so noticeable in the Jewish community and to a certain and lesser extent in the Italian-Irish community, for some reason is not there. We should focus on the necessity to animate this particular energy, but he comes to the conclusion, which strikes me as plausible, that the people who can best do it, who can do it most effectively, are Negroes themselves. Let me conclude by reminding you, ladies and gentlemen, that where the Negro is concerned, the danger, as far as I can see at this moment, is that they will seek to reach out for some sort of radical solutions on the basis of which the true problem is obscured. They have done a great deal to focus on the fact of white discrimination against the Negroes. They have done a great deal to agitate a moral concern, but where, in fact, do they go now? They seem to be slipping, if you will read carefully, for instance, the words of Mr. Bayard Rustin, towards some sort of a Procrustean formulation which ends up less urging the advancement of the Negro than the regression of the white people. 14 times as many people in New York City born of Negroes are illegitimate as of whites. This is a problem. How shall we address it? By seeking out laws that encourage illegitimacy in white people? This, unfortunately, tends to be the rhetorical momentum that some of their arguments are taking.
One thing you might do, Mr. Buckley, is let them vote in Mississippi.
I agree. I agree. I couldn't agree with you more, and for except lest I appear too ingratiating, which is hardly my objective here tonight. I think actually what is wrong in Mississippi, sir, is not that not enough Negroes are voting, but that too many white people are voting.
I agree. How many of them?
Booker T. Washington said... Booker T. Washington said that the important thing where Negroes are concerned is not that they hold public office, but that they be prepared to hold public office. Not that they vote, but that they be prepared to vote. What are we going to do with the Negroes? Having taught the Negroes in Mississippi to despise Barnett, Ross Barnett, shall we then teach them to emulate their cousins in Harlem and adore Adam Clayton Powell, Jr.? It is much more complicated, sir, than simply the question of giving them the vote. If I were myself a constituent of the community of Mississippi at this moment, what I would do is vote to lift the standards of the vote so as to disqualify 65% of the white people who are presently voting. Not simply to give the... I say then that what we need is a considerable amount of frankness that acknowledges that there are two sets of difficulties. The difficulties of the white person who acts as white people and brown people and black people do all over the world to protect their own vested interests, who have, as all of the races in the entire world have, and suffer from a kind of a racial narcissism which tends always to convert every contingency into such a way as to maximize their own power. That, yes, we must do. But we must also reach through to the Negro people and tell them that their best chances are in a mobile society. And the most mobile society in the world today, my friends, is the United States of America. The most mobile society of the United States in the world is the United States of America, and it is precisely that mobility which will give opportunities to the Negroes which they must be encouraged to take. But they must not, in the course of their ordeal, be encouraged to adopt the kind of cynicism, the kind of despair, the kind of iconoclasm that is urged upon them by Mr. Baldwin in his recent works. Because of one thing, I can tell you, I believe with absolute authority, that where the United States is concerned, if it ever becomes a confrontation between a continuation of our own sort of idealism, the private stock of which, granted, like most people in the world, we tend to lavish only every now and then on public enterprises, reserving it so often for our own irritations and pleasures. But the fundamental friend of the Negro people in the United States is the good nature, and is the generosity, and is the good wishes, is the decency, the fundamental decency that do lie at the reserves of the spirit of the American people. These must not be laughed at, and under no circumstances must they be laughed at, and under no circumstances must America be addressed
he's still
and
keeping
told
them
that the only alternative
in his head,
to the status
which is
quo
funny.
Is to overthrow that civilization which we consider to be the faith of our fathers, the faith indeed of your fathers. This is what must animate whatever meliorism must come, because if it does finally come to a confrontation, a radical confrontation between giving up what we understand to be the best features of the American way of life, which at that level is indistinguishable, so far as I can see, from the European way of life, then we will fight the issue. And we will fight the issue not only in the Cambridge Union, but we will fight it as you were once recently called to do, on beaches and on hills and on mountains and on landing grounds. And we will be convinced that just as you won the war against a particular threat to civilization, you were nevertheless waging a war in favor of and for the benefit of Germans, your own enemies, just as we are convinced that if it should ever come to that kind of a confrontation, our own determination to win the struggle will be a determination to wage a war not only for whites, but also for Negroes.
Thoughts?
I mean,
you have a lot to say.
Like, it's just like the thinking of that side of the argument has not changed since then at all. Like,
right.
It's still the same shit. It's still bootstraps and victim blaming,
individualism.
Right. Yep. And millionaires is the sign of like success, you know. And
or
like,
a few black people are able to make it, so why can't the rest?
Right. Which is the same thing they say to the poor whites. Same thing.
Right.
It's America sees itself as embarrassed millionaires and not the proletariat it is. That's Steinbeck. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, The Grapes of Wrath, Steinbeck. But I mean, it's still the same. Like, we know that that's just not the case, and he's waxing poetic about it as this super capitalist utopia that it supposedly is, and it's like, well, at the same time, saying that this person is like only putting on the fucking skin of like civilization, practically. You know, the European and American people, the mindset, the whatever he fucking said, you know, like, I don't know. Most of it was obfuscation, you know, it was just
Yes.
word salad, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, basically. But.
And that's only to mask the few points he's got that are fucking racist and shitty and capitalist.
Right, but I think what was kind of poignant to me, now granted, obviously, at least with the clip that we got, because this was an hour long, there were other speakers, but there were students who were speaking also. And I'm not sure if those were actually broadcast, but just to give you some context, it was not just them who was speaking here. But the idea that Buckley but in the debate, it was Baldwin who spoke first,
right?
And then Buckley spoke after. Like Baldwin couldn't rebut against what Buckley was saying. It was just you say your piece and you're done.
Right.
So,
yeah, it was more like a town hall situation. Wasn't necessarily a debate.
Buckley spent a good portion, which I feel like if you have to attack your opponent,
right, you've lost.
Like as he did with Baldwin, you lost.
Right.
Because, and you saw what he did there. I think he basically described Baldwin as being overly emotional.
Baldwin wants his people to take over the country and get power. He's worried about power. It's like, yeah.
So
aren't you?
Right.
In this statement, you're worried about losing power? Like, but yeah, that's the thing I noticed the most was his like separation, even in his own brain, like the entire time. It was like reinforcing the difference while saying that, like, you know, we're not supposed to see the differences, you know?
Right.
Like,
no, which again, it's a problem today. It's like, I don't see color. Well, the problem is I do.
Yeah. Like it
the problem
exists.
is many of us do.
And it's
to
really
not acknowledge that.
And all of that's to like it's so that you don't look at the differences. To me,
right.
Like you don't look at the differences to see, oh, the difference isn't necessarily specifically race, it's class. They're fucking stuck in this shitty class system that we're all in. And they just, it's affecting them more.
Not you, but like which your ancestors created.
Yeah, the system is fucking both of us. You know?
Right.
Like at this point, which was Baldwin's whole point. Like, that's why he was talking about the fucking labor issue. Like, it's like, no, it's the plight of the worker and the one who's stuck in this fucking rat race, who's stuck in the same ghettos I am, you know? Like, we're all wanting to get out of that system, and you tell us we can, and then there is no opportunities for us, you know? Like, we're meant to be here, where you put us. Like, but yeah, I do find his statements interesting. It's the same conservative talking points that we hear all the time. So
right, but it's funny, but it's not funny, but it's the idea, like, we think of all of these, you know, like right-wing pundits who say basically the same shit and probably worse now than they were back then.
And he's worried about anti-white
we think that this
policy, you know, like the whole time he's yelling about, well, they're saying that it's really too many white people are voting. Like that's his whole shtick is like,
which is true.
Yeah.
That it's
mainly
true.
old
But
folks.
why is
Too
it
many.
that too many? Right. But
Right.
again, why are too many white people voting?
Well,
It's
he was
because
saying
black people weren't.
he was saying like he was trying to relate it to the thing he had just said. Like he had gotten like interrupted, and he's like trying to bring it back to his point of like, you know, Baldwin's trying to make it to where we get anti-white legislation and like,
Right.
you know, should we
even with
incentivize the one was should we incentivize illegitimate children and white folks? That was his fucking explanation, because white folks are fucking without and making babies, right? Should we encourage white people to be fucking and making babies? That's bad, right? Like, you know, especially, you know, you got to be married and all that. Like he's doing that bit, you know, trying to dog whistle his way into black people are animalistic and they be fucking, you know, like that's
right.
That's what he's trying to fucking insinuate. And they do crime more. And should we incentivize white crime so that like that's what he was blaming Baldwin and his compatriots for policy that does that, you know?
Right.
And it's like, nah, dude, you're just telling on yourself here, bro. You know, like.
But you notice during the thing, you notice like when Baldwin was speaking, no one said a word. Everyone was tuned into what he was saying. When Buckley was speaking, people
were scrutinizing, like, hey,
which I think, to be fair, was common practice, like for these debates, that people within crowd would speak up, you know, against whoever was speaking.
Well, and that's very.
But with
British
Baldwin
thing to
was
do,
kind of
like,
unique. That
state of Commons,
right?
House of Commons shit,
right? Which honestly, well, so two things along with that, like, but the idea that no one said a word during Baldwin's thing was in of itself unique. That actually, I think that was reported on. I think maybe in the New York Times, I believe that they mentioned, you know, oh, he got a standing O. So that was a big deal. That one, he got a standing O, but two, everyone was so enthralled with what James Baldwin had to say. By the way, according to this, he won.
Right.
But obviously, you know.
Yeah, they did a vote afterwards. Do you have that?
Right. Yes.
Here, I'll find it.
No, I got it. Yeah. The proposition led by Baldwin won by landslide majority of 380. With the A's receiving 544 votes to the no's 164. So overwhelmingly, people thought that Baldwin was able to state his case much better than Buckley. So, but yeah, I think, this was fun. I think just in terms of, a change of pace, but I think, you know, it's kind of interesting to kind of go back in history and see how in a lot of ways we've kind of devolved into having this kind of discourse, like,
here we go.
Tellers take
you
their
know,
places,
kind of.
please.
Hold on.
They voted in favor of the motion being that the American dream is at the expense of the Negro. They voted in favor of that motion 544 persons and against 164 persons. The motion is therefore carried by 380 votes. I declare the House to stand adjourned.
So, yeah, landslide victory.
Overwhelming. Right. So, but yeah, I think again, it's, as the saying goes, there are some things that, while things change, there's some things that remain the same. I think it's still the idea of a lot of these conservative talking points is still kind of the rhetoric that, which, to be fair, I think is actually very interesting that they've been able to maintain those views even now, like from all the way back then. So it just kind of shows how locked in Republicans are or conservatives are in terms of
their rhetoric,
having
shit.
your talking points and the rhetoric, and just really just stay the course. Whereas on the liberal side, it tends to be more waffly. depending on the wind and the culture or whatever else, or in response to them, like they don't have anything necessarily to counter as this is our North Star. Like they're just kind of liberals are just kind of generally, I feel like, all over the place. Like 1 minute, we're for,
well, and it's by design.
Like,
because
right.
like both of those problems are like, to deal with them, it's deal with the class issues, and like the powers that control things are like, no. We like being up where we are, We don't want you fucking heathens in our vicinity. So y'all stay down there. Pretty much. But
right.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it's interesting just watching this debate, but I think more importantly, I wouldn't say civil, but like there was class to it. Like now it's just kind of like a yelling match, like kind of what Piers Morgan does on his show. It's just like you yell over each other to try and make your point, which is often based on emotion and like screaming at people in order to try and make your point. That didn't happen here. It was more like, I want to say my piece and call it a day, moving on. And, almost kind of similar to what happens in Parliament, somewhat, or any European country, when they debate.
Yeah,
so,
House of Commons style.
I think there was definitely, So I think it's kind of interesting to kind of look back and see how things were done back then versus now, and how we've kind of dramatized like a lot of these debates in order for clicks and like views and sound bites and all that kind of stuff.
And they also had a vote at the end.
But
they're like, okay, everyone in the room,
right?
How do you vote? And the whole room's impartial. Now that would be like, if you could possibly keep something without bot manipulation, people actually voting the things like, oh yeah, no, that's a good idea. But anyway, yeah, you have to have a lot of faith in humanity for that to work out too. And it's like, my faith in that is not very high at the minute, So,
right.
But anyway, talking about this stuff is why we're demonetized, as you might well know. You can scan that QR code on your screen or go to ko-fi.com/Indie News Network if you want to keep the lights on over here and say screw YouTube. Otherwise, like and subscribe, hit the share button, send this to your friends. They might need to hear this. Let us know what you think. What does this rhetoric sound like to you? Otherwise, thanks for watching.
Yeah. So again, thank you guys for tuning in on a special stream, and let us know, if we want us to do more of this stuff, just to kind of change our pace, but also just kind of see how we've gotten in a lot of ways to where we are now. But the potential, what could be, if we do like, I'm not even sure like longer debates, but like any like discussions like these long form that we're not clipping out entirely, that we can just watch and kind of talk through, and having you guys kind of interact with it too. I definitely think there's a value to that, rather than just kind of splicing everything.
Debates ended up becoming like a sport almost to the American public, where like,
well, yeah, it makes sense given how
the same teams are going to fight over and over again. There's never going to be a definitive, all right, the Celtics are always going to beat the Bulls, like with debates, that should have, like, ideas should just be, okay, this one's the good one. This is the good idea. The other one was a bad idea. We've had this debate already, but like they've turned it into this like weekly, monthly dance that they can play, That's That's part of my issue with it. Like, this is 1965.
Right.
You could have heard this fucking debate yesterday. Like,
yeah.
You know, so I think that's why all of us are pissed off all the time, because we have seen all this shit. We've had these discussions, and we're waiting for the fucking shit to catch up, you know?
Right.
So, but anyway, well, I think there should be Jesse tomorrow, so people can tune in to the channel to check out Indy and Jesse's stuff. I think we got Angels doing stuff Saturday, I think, still. Sunday, me and Indy will do How Do We Miss That? And boats. Should be a Rumble only boats. It's the last of the month. So, but yeah. Anything else? Anything else I'm missing?
I think that's it.
Cool.
Just follow us on Twitter at Get Indie News for updates. And yeah, like we always say, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for being so committed to us. And yeah, we'll keep doing this.
Yep. Tune in next week.
Same bat time, same bat channel.
All right, fam. Remember, kids, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
Have a good week, everyone.
There's a difference between peace and liberation, is there not? You can have injustice and have peace. Isn't that correct? Peace and be enslaved.
Yes.
So peace isn't the answer.
No.
Liberation is the answer.